Welcome to the Compact Mysteries podcast from compactmysteries.com, formerly known as 5-Minute Mysteries, the show where we try to unravel a different bite-sized mystery each week, from baffling disappearances and strange objects to unexplained events and mysterious places. This is episode 36, The Mystery of the Anasazi Civilization. High in the dry canyons and mesas of the American Southwest lie the stone remnants of a remarkable people, often referred to in the past as the Anasazi. That term, rooted in a Navajo word meaning ancient enemies or ancient outsiders, has fallen out of favor due to its negative connotations. Today, they are more respectfully known as the Ancestral Puebloans, the ancestors of modern Pueblo peoples such as the Hopi and Zuni. For over 1,000 years, they built complex settlements, carved homes into cliffs, and developed a culture deeply rooted in the land, the sky, and the cycles of nature. And then, around the year 1300, they left. They didn't disappear without a trace, but the silence they left behind has puzzled archaeologists and historians ever since. What caused such a successful civilization to abandon its cities? Was it drought, conflict, or something we've yet to understand fully? The Ancestral Puebloans were not a single tribe, but rather a network of communities spread across the Four Corners region, where the states of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado meet. Between approximately 100 AD and roughly 1300 AD, they constructed some of the most impressive pre-Columbian architecture in North America. Early on, they lived in pit houses, simple homes dug partly into the ground and covered with timber and mud. But over time, their construction techniques evolved. They began building above-ground villages, then multi-story stone dwellings, and eventually the famous cliff houses like those at Mesa Verde. These cliffside homes were engineering marvels, built with shaped sandstone blocks, wooden beams and plaster. Tucked into natural alcoves in the rock, they offered shelter from the elements and added defense against any potential threat. Many dwellings could only be accessed by climbing ladders or narrow footpaths. Inside these settlements, the Ancestral Puebloans lived in extended family groups. They farmed maize, beans, and squash, despite the arid conditions, using clever techniques to manage water. They also hunted deer, rabbits, and other game and gathered wild plants. But their society wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. They built circular underground chambers called kivas, used for both religious ceremonies and political gatherings. These kivas were often aligned with astronomical events, such as solstices and equinoxes, demonstrating a profound understanding of celestial cycles. Their art also reflected their worldview. Pottery was often decorated with geometric patterns and animal figures, typically in black and white. Petroglyphs, etched into canyon walls, told stories or marked sacred sites. Everything they made seemed to carry symbolic meaning. The height of ancestral Puebloan society came between the 9th and 12th centuries, when places like Chaco Canyon flourished. Chaco wasn't just a village, it was a regional hub. Great houses like Pueblo Bonito stood several stories tall and held hundreds of rooms. Roads connected Chaco to distant outposts, some stretching for miles in unnaturally straight lines across the desert. That level of planning suggests central organization, trade networks, and possibly religious or political influence across the region. Yet by the 13th century, this world began to unravel. Something changed. People started to leave the significant settlements. Villages were abandoned. Entire regions were depopulated. Within a few generations, the great houses and cliff dwellings stood empty. Why? There's no definitive answer, but several likely explanations exist. Climate played a significant role. Scientific data, especially tree ring records, indicate that the American Southwest experienced a severe drought beginning in the late 12th century. This would have made farming extremely difficult and placed enormous stress on food supplies. Communities may have been forced to move in search of more reliable water sources. Conflict may have been another factor. Archaeological evidence shows signs of increasing tension during this period. Defensive architecture, burnt dwellings, and even human remains that suggest violence. As conditions worsened, it's possible that once cooperative communities began competing over resources. Social and political factors might also have contributed. A system that depended on centralized hubs like Chaco may have become too fragile in the face of environmental stress. Leadership could have broken down. People may have lost faith in the ceremonial centers that once held their society together. But here's the important part. The ancestral Puebloans didn't vanish. They migrated, they adapted, they settled in new areas, particularly along the Rio Grande and in parts of Arizona and New Mexico. Their descendants are the modern Pueblo peoples, including the Hopi, Zuni, and others, who continue to reside in the Southwest today. They maintain languages, traditions, and ceremonies that link them directly to those ancient cliff dwellers. Many of these communities have oral histories that explain the migration. Some say it was part of a spiritual journey. Others speak of drought and hardship. Archaeologists increasingly recognize the value of these stories, and many now work alongside Pueblo communities to better understand the past. Sites like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon are more than tourist attractions. They're sacred places, still connected to living cultures. The ancestral Puebloans have left behind more than buildings. They've left a legacy of ingenuity and resilience. They created architecture that still stands today, without the use of modern tools or machinery. They lived in harmony with a rugged landscape for centuries, using knowledge passed down through generations. Their story also reminds us that civilizations aren't always wiped out by war or invasion. Sometimes they slowly shift, relocate, or evolve. Sometimes the end of one era is simply the beginning of another. Today, when visitors walk through the silent stone rooms of a cliff dwelling or stand beneath the towering walls of Pueblo Bonito, it's easy to feel a sense of mystery. Who lived here? What were their lives like? What did they believe? And what made them leave? Those questions keep the ancestral Puebloans alive in our imagination. Their legacy challenges the notion that advanced societies can only emerge from large empires or cities. Here were people who built in stone, charted the stars, and left behind monuments not to conquer, but to preserve community and ensure survival. The mystery of the ancestral Puebloans may never be solved entirely, and perhaps it doesn't need to be, because what they achieved still speaks for itself, in stone, in silence, and in the traditions of their descendants who carry the story forward. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Compact Mysteries podcast from compactmysteries.com. If you did, why not leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts? And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you would like to support us more directly, please consider buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/mysteries coffee to see how. Also, please check out our other Compact podcasts. You will find them all at compacthistories.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.